I do want to introduce our fantastic panel today. Um, Ronell, Courtney, Neil, thank you all so much for joining us today and blessing us with your time. Welcome to another Sales Hacker webinar.
Thanks. I think we're probably all happy to be here. I'm not going to speak for everyone though, so it's just assume.
You just did, and it's all good, Courtney. I'm happy to be. How about Mikey's 3 or 2 items was like 8? How about just got a couple of things.
I forget that there's more than you think, and it kind of keeps coming in. But good call out. I'll make sure to list them off properly next time. Awesome. Well, thank you 3 for being here. But before we kind of start this discussion and so on, I do like to get a bit more background on yourself, just so we can get a bit more acquainted with everybody and learn a bit more about you. So, Courtney, I'll start with you. Do you mind just giving us a bit more background on yourself, what you're all about, so we can get a bit more acquainted?
Sure. So my name's Courtney Sylvester. I am the Senior Revenue Operations Manager at OpenPrize. I'm actually fairly new to the role. I think I'd probably best be described as a jack of all trades, master of none. But what I really love doing is making teams more efficient, and I usually through data, usually through analytics, and some hard questions. A lot of times, just why? Why do you need that? It's a lot of what I end up doing and what I ask, and I do it in sometimes a nice way, sometimes not so much. But I really enjoy just helping companies grow and utilizing what you have before jumping into we should buy a billion other things. But I'm really excited to be here, and it's cool. I work at a RevOps platform now, so we kind of help tons of companies do that. Just move all of your data in a way that makes sense. Make sure that everything you're doing, if you're doing a lot of things, you can make it automated. You can find new ways without having to learn how to write code. To actually make your systems far more efficient. So I'm at a place where we do a lot of that. So that's it for me.
Amazing. Well, Courtney, thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to hear what you have to say. Before I pass it over to the next panelist, I want a little personal thing about you. What is your favorite sandwich?
I like to cook, and my favorite sandwich is a Cubano because I can't make them. I mess them up every single time. So when they're done horribly, they're terrible, but done well, they're like the best sandwich that exists. And I'm sure everyone else has an opinion on that. I just think that you're wrong. That's all.
I love that. And everybody in the chat, let us know what your favorite sandwich is. We want to know what's going on there, and let's get that debate going, because the sandwich conversation can go on for a long time. Okay, well, I'll throw it over to Ronell. Ronell, do you mind just giving us a bit more background on yourself? Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. So we can get a bit more acquainted.
Absolutely. First and foremost, I want to thank the audience as well. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Like Mikey said, this is a middle of the day sort of thing. So if you're taking time out of your day to hang out, we absolutely want to serve you and make sure that we're coming correct. So get in those comments, ask your questions, be part of the live team, because on replay it's cool, but live is even better because we can engage with you and answer your questions and talk about what you want to talk about. All right, so my name is Ronell Richards. I run a few companies. I run a company called IBA, which is a technology sales and marketing agency. I run Ronell Richards LLC, and what we do there is we help carriers and suppliers through the indirect channel grow their businesses, amplify their message, and we help agencies to scale their sales teams and sales business. And last but certainly not least, I'm the founder of Business and Bourbon, and Business and Bourbon is my passion. Business and Bourbon is a multimedia platform that is changing the world. We're helping people to do better business through building deeper relationships. So we create experiences and events that help leaders, sales leaders and entrepreneurs to connect and grow their businesses and collaborate. And I get the benefit of hanging out with a whole lot of great entrepreneurs and leaders and learning from them. And I'm excited for this conversation because I get to kind of, I play in 2 worlds, right? I play in the marketing world and the sales world a lot. So I'm interested to kind of bring that sales perspective to the marketing thing and see where this goes.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Ronell. I assume, based off of Business and Bourbon, that you are a bourbon connoisseur.
Everyone assumes that. I am a business connoisseur.
There you go.
It's always business before bourbon.
Always business.
Remember
first.
that, folks.
Agree. Yeah, you're right. Awesome. Well, do you have a favorite sandwich, Ronald?
Man, so I love sandwiches. So that is a very hard question for me. I would say that a well-prepared, like Italian sandwich is just a thing of beauty with the right bread and the right meats and, right balsamic vinegar and goods. It just has that perfect mix of sweet and salty and chew. And so there we go. I'm going to go Italian, but again, I love sandwiches. So it depends on the day.
Hey, I'm with you. I'm a diehard sandwich guy as well. So, well, thank you, Ronald, for being here. Super excited to hear what you have to say as well. This is gonna be fun. Last but not least, Neil Harrington, thank you so much for being here. Really, really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. Please just give us a bit of background on yourself there.
Yeah, absolutely. Super happy to be here. Thank you for everyone for joining. My background, I'm currently the VP of Sales and Alliances at StackMoxie. We're a seed company where we do test automation for marketing tech stacks. I've had the good fortune of following good teams and have a very wide experience. I started at Salesforce way back in the day. I then moved to a company called Microsoft. I'm not sure what they're doing these days or where they ended up. But I got to Microsoft via the Yammer acquisition and was lucky enough to sort of help build the Office 365 sales team, where I dealt with this issue probably 15 hours out of the day, and all the complexity of both a startup and sort of Microsoft rules trying to mesh together. So happy to bring that experience. I then went to a company called Topo, which got recently bought by Gartner, where it was a research and advisory firm where we thought about these deep, complex thoughts all day long. And then that led me to my current gig here at StackMoxie. And let me tell you about the best sandwich. Like, we can talk about what the form of a sandwich can take. Pop-Tarts are not a sandwich. Hot dogs are not a sandwich. But here we go. The best sandwich is a Nashville fried chicken. You get fried chicken, the perfect amount of spice. You get the white bread listed on top of it, and you get sort of that pickle for the Ronell Crunch there. I'm gonna dub that the Ronell Crunch. But here's what makes it. And my partner and I have sampled a ton of Nashville fried chicken because it's like the rage at all the food trucks. The absolute key is getting vinegar into the chicken, and that sort of cuts the spice and cuts everything. And that's what truly makes a good fried chicken sandwich.
I love the passion.
Or whatever you like, whatever.
No, I'm with you. You know what? I think it's a close second in my books as well. And especially down in California, it's all the fried chickens, all the max out there, right? So I love that. That sounds great. Fantastic. Well, thank you, three, for being here. Appreciate you sharing a bit more about yourself so we can all be a bit more acquainted. But without further ado, I think we should kind of kick it off and get the conversation started. So everybody's here to speak about one thing, which is how to win that revenue relay, preparing the handoff from marketing to sales to AEs across the whole approach here, right? So I want to start it off, and I will direct it first over to Courtney here. But I want to kind of understand a bit more about, you're super experienced. You've been in multiple different roles at multiple different companies. But I would love to understand kind of the experiences that you've had of when and where you have seen that pass off from marketing over to sales go wrong. Because there's multiple parts of the puzzle. Where have you seen it typically go wrong the most across your different kind of experiences there?
So I was afraid for a second you're going to ask me how many times I've seen it go right. And I was like, oh God, I wasn't ready for that question. But really, it does go wrong most of the time for one reason or another. But the main reason that I see time and time again, we talk about a lack of communication, and communication is a whole other webinar that that's not even a webinar. That's like the rest of your life trying to be better at communicating. But I think where companies really start to go wrong is everyone needs goals. But if the goals that you create for your teams do not go together, how on earth can you expect your company to prosper? And that's the main thing that I see time and time again. It's like, all right, well, I need this to count for me or I don't get credit. We need to be looking at that big picture all the time. And I laugh when people say this, but it is true. You kind of need an adult in the room to herd everyone together and make sure that everything you're doing is to help each other out. Like you win together versus like, I just need to make as many meetings as possible. It doesn't matter how bad they are or, just as long as someone showed up, that's what I did. That's my job. And that's the end of it. You need to make sure everyone is working towards that common goal, getting the best customers in, and that takes collaboration.
Mm-hmm. And I've also found too that it's like so many people like organizations tend to kind of just be like, okay, this is my role, this is what I do, and that's what I focus on. How have you how have you been able to kind of bring everybody together to kind of create that common goal?
So this is going to be a little unpopular, not probably with the panelists, but in general, you have to admit you're wrong or that you don't quite know what you're doing. I was joking earlier when I'm like, I'm a jack of all trades, master of none. But what goes along with that is I'm super cool with being wrong. Like, I don't care. It doesn't matter. If I learn from that and I can do a better job in the future, that often is better than when I had a hunch. It was right, but maybe I'm not totally sure why. I now know why something didn't work. So I see marketing teams, they just want to get in more leads. Maybe they don't care about the quality of the leads. Or you see SDR teams or AE teams, and all they want is they'll work any deal to death, even if it's in, like an SDR or an AE who can't make that decision. You need to make sure that everyone is aligned with who you're going after, the messaging that you're bringing to that, and keep to it. It's also like creating a set of rules and sticking to them and making fewer exceptions is the big thing. Like, there are always going to be exceptions to things, but that can't be the rule to how you operate, or things just kind of go nuts.
Yeah.
Can I jump in there real quick?
Please do.
Courtney, first of all, that's fire. And I am that resonates so much with me. I want to speak specifically to the leaders that are in the audience because, Courtney talked about basically outcomes. Okay. And where I find that the issue is in between the two organizations is that what is a successful outcome between both organizations is totally different. And at the end of the day, what is it that we're really trying to accomplish? We're trying to sell some stuff, right? We're trying to close deals. And oftentimes the metrics and the KPIs that marketing folks are judged by, so they're just products of their environment, but what they're judged by does not directly correlate to the end result that we want, which is to close and sell some stuff. And so leaders are creating an environment that's somewhat confrontational and adversarial because the salespeople, they care about closing. I need to close some business. And meanwhile, marketing folks are being held to standards of just like getting people in the room or the amount of just the raw amount of leads, to Courtney's point, whether they are highly qualified or not. So one of the things I've always done in my organizations is make sure that everybody's tied to the money. Everyone gets tied to what ultimately makes us successful. That doesn't mean that those KPIs that I just mentioned before for marketing won't still exist, but if part of marketing's compensation, is part of everyone's compensation is correlated directly to what is an overall company success, which is a sale, a close. It changes how they look at the execution of those KPIs. It changes how they look at those metrics. Like instead of just like the raw appointments, they're thinking more intentionally about the quality of those so that we can ultimately get the result that matters the most to the company.
I think also, so this is like a big other part of this is in doing what Ronell said, and like you're starting to think about the end result and everybody is, you're sort of forced to think critically about every action you're taking. And we all have tons of tools. I love tools. Everybody does. But I think that sometimes they stop you from having to actually think about what you're doing and the end result of that action. Like, why am I calling a headquarters phone number and just sitting on hold for like 5 minutes? What is this accomplishing? That got a dial? Like, that's not helping anything here. And any organization who is basing your pay on that, they're not going to see results.
Yeah. No, I love that too. Neil, do you have anything to add to kind of that?
Yeah, like where I see this pass off go wrong is, you've got marketing that's trying to get it through, based on what other KPIs. Sales obviously, as Ronald talked about, we want to go close deals. This is also why the global SDR or senior director of SDRs has now risen through the ranks, is because there's a lot of complexity that can go wrong. And it used to just be, SDRs have to go make dials and get meetings, but now it's become much more complex on how they go about that. So that role's definitely risen. Where I see this start to go wrong is as companies are growing, and make no mistake, like all these things I'm about to mention, they used to be, quote, for the big guys. Now this is happening in Series A and Series B. We have product-led growth. So we have somebody in California just starting up a free trial or free instance, and then we have somebody in, I don't know, Germany doing it. How do we route those two? Do they get routed to the same rep? So we have to think about multiple geos. Companies at Series A and B are doing different products. Are we a multi-portfolio AE that's selling those? How does that look like? And then we have the different complexities of like the classic GE General Electric example, where you have multiple solitary units that have their own finance team, their own purchasing decisions. So you can't just be the GE rep. You have to sort of split that out. So all those create complexity. And when we put automation in front of that, that sort of breaks it. So what we have to think about is, before we implement the technology, what's the sort of roadmap or the rules of the road that we're thinking about as we go and implement this? And now I'm going to get busted for being a big company guy, but I've got to use the famous words Fed SLED. So the federal government and state and local education. That becomes incredibly complex, and we make it sound like a monolith, but it's not. We have the GSA for the federal government. We've got your local, little school district. So how those gets passed, and every person that's been on a Fed SLED team, right? We've got older people with very complex rules of understanding this. Do we route it? We usually don't route it to an SDR or BDR. We usually end route it. Making sure that those get routed properly is incredibly complex.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I've got another I want to add on to kind of what you were mentioning there, Neil, with, implementing it in Series A, Series B, and then Ronell, you working with a lot of early stage companies as well. What are your guys' thoughts, or, let's stick with the thoughts or even advice on kind of how to do that at early stage companies, how to create that alignment very early, so it continues to go as they grow and as they scale, against companies that have already kind of established themselves quite a bit with their their siloed approaches, and how to kind of like almost rebuild that to be more aligned.
Yeah.
I'll start with you, Rana. What are your thoughts?
Well, early stage, it's easier, right? And in fact, not only is it easier, it usually happens. It usually happens organically. It's when companies get bigger and they start segmenting away to where they start creating these separate groups that don't communicate well with each other. So it really comes down to communication. And one of the reasons why it happens organically, usually in these startup organizations, is because people have multiple responsibilities. You may be marketing and sales, and so you're owning different parts of the same, or you're owning multiple pieces in both of those worlds, right? And so the communication is there, and that's really where everything breaks down. It's in communication. So here's my piece of advice for you companies out there that are either established or startup organizations. You've got to build teams, right? If your marketing team is working as a team with your sales team, here's what I mean by that: pair people up. Actually, they have to understand each other's job. The biggest issue that I see between sales and marketing, and again, I'm a sales guy first. I'm a marketer, but I'm a sales guy first, is that salespeople do not understand the value that marketers bring. They don't see any value. They're like, okay, I go close stuff and you bring me shitty leads. Right. And so when you team these folks up and they can learn each other's job, and then we go back to what I was saying before about or Courtney was saying as well about outcomes, then they're going to get more aligned on what a successful outcome looks like. So, they understand that, hey, look, or the marketer understands that, hey, look, when I send this over to the salesperson, this isn't so good. And this is why. And so I need to focus more on on generating opportunities that are actually going to be a better fit and they can actually work with, right? And again, tying all the back to what I originally said about compensation, you got to incentivize the behavior that you want. If everyone's compensation is tied to the desired outcome that's going to benefit the company overall, you're going to have better success. Shout out to Marciela too. I'm sorry because I'm looking in the chat and she's like, the worst sandwich she had. I don't know why you would ever do this in your life, my friend, but an egg salad sandwich from a gas station. Are you trying to kill yourself? What were you doing? Anyway, that's my 2 cents. Neil, what you got?
Yeah, I love what you're saying. One thing I always like to do is like get a team scrum for 30 minutes so that the marketer or the marketing operations person kind of watches through on just how that person does their job. And what I've also liked to see, account-based marketing or an account-based approach has sort of kind of gotten a lot of buzzwords, but at the core, one of the things that everybody was trying to do with account-based was to really rank their segment, right? What's an A lead? What's a B lead? What's a C lead? And then what are the personas within that group? So that also then helps take away the mysterious of like, oh, this is a good or bad lead. It's sort of been determined, or it's sort of been situated around, hey, this is who we should go focus on, and that helps out a tremendous amount. And I like bringing that back to the marketing team of saying, like, this is what we saw. This is the number that we saw from this. Is that what we were expecting? So that helps bring it down to a granular level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Courtney, do you have anything to add there?
So I think, I definitely agree with everything you guys are saying. I think that actually what ends up being one of the biggest issues as you go from early stage to, later stage companies is actually ego. And that usually comes with like, well, we always did it this way and that's how we do it. Or it might just be like being averse to change, or it always worked one way, but realizing that something that worked when you started because you're like the VP reaching out, or you're reaching out to different types of people, like you have to constantly be reevaluating every single thing that you're doing and be open to new ways of doing them, because there's always going to be a better way. You're never going to find the perfect way. It's just impossible. And thinking like that is pretty detrimental to your business. Like you're not going to grow if you just decide that this one way is the way to do it and I'm never going to change. You need to reevaluate even when things are working so that you can always optimize and do better. So that would be the only thing I say. I see a lot of ego coming into that. Usually it's like, well, I did it perfectly, so nothing needs to change. It's like, okay, fine. Well, this is where we're at. This is what you want. Then this is where your business is going to stay most likely.
Yeah. And I want to kind of add on to that. Like what Ronell was saying, when it's an earlier stage company, everybody can kind of see their impact on the success, right? What happens when, like for instance, I'll start with you, Neil, say at Microsoft, right? They're so large and they're so big that it's quite difficult to really see the overall impact that you have on the organization or so. How do you think that affects the back to what Courtney was saying, the ability to change and do new processes?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because Microsoft always has so much complexity, and they've also gone through a lot of transformation of like having Azure be product-led growth, etc. One of the things I was going to mention is for Ronell, like for companies that start off and they've got a high velocity sales process, it's easy to sort of pay the SDRs on closed business, right? But then as they start to get longer sales cycle, we have a 6-month or a 9-month, you might have SDRs that have come and gone at the same time before that deal gets closed. So I agree. We shouldn't just be paying reps on meetings, but we should possibly be paying them as on something that's a little bit more gated that involves the AE. And I don't think that's just, oh, now it's stage 2 or whatever, but something that takes real commitment from the customer as well. And so that way we're sort of paying along the lines, and it's not just something activity-based like meetings. Back to answer your question, Mikey, around like, how do I sort of impact change? The frontline sellers are the people that are seeing it all day long, right? So if they're not being brought into the meetings, and it doesn't have to be all of them, let's not burden them, but if they're not being brought into like a monthly or quarterly alignment meeting, because they're the ones that see all the things going wrong, and they're in Slack all day telling everybody, oh my God, look at how messed up this one was. So bringing them in just to give that perspective is incredibly important. And I don't think we need to forget about the frontline seller.
Hmm. Yeah, love that. Awesome. Cool. Now I want to kind of identify signs for people that are that are dealing with this right now, that are trying to figure out, okay, what are kind of some of the key things that we need to look at in order to start to change. Um, what would you think, or what would you recommend that people kind of start really looking at or analyzing in their process from passing leads from marketing to sales, in order to start kind of, okay, we need to do something here. We need to make something change. We need to start reworking this. Courtney, I'll start with you.
It really would depend on who you're talking to, or what's going on. But I think what you probably see the most frequently is marketing will be like, well, we got X more leads in this month, but we're not seeing any sales like this quarter. Like, it's not leading to more sales. So something like that, where it seems like you have two departments that really are against one another at this point and sort of fighting or pointing the finger, you really need somebody to come in and take a look at everything in kind of a neutral way. And you can't be like really impassioned one way or another. It's just, what am I seeing in this process? Like, what could be improved? Is it like just communication? Is it that maybe we are sending every lead over from marketing, even if it's like some basic thing from like an AE, and like that's not really a lead. Like, we want to nurture those people, and kind of taking in everyone's opinion there. Because my guess at companies, when I've seen this happen, where marketing's doing everything they can, they think they're doing their job, but sales is still not closing things, there are probably some other things happening. So open it up anonymously, let people send in their tips, because they might have said stuff before and it went unlistened to or unheard. It's usually a bigger communication issue at like a higher level. And you need to not look at that like people are complaining, look at it, take in that information and come up with some solutions and some things to try. And from there, my suggestion would always be to come with a plan and execute that plan and let people know how it worked. So you know that you're like, next time you ask people for solutions, they will actually give you them because they know that you tried it and you're looking for a real like outcome here to see how this works, what happens, and help pinpoint where this is going wrong and what you can do to improve. What I see the most is leaders just saying, we're going to fix it. It's going to be fixed this. And then like, there's no actual action plan. There's nothing that they're telling people they're going to do. It's also how you lose people. And that's a big issue when you have these silos and no one can get past them. You're going to start losing people, because a lot of people do want to do their jobs, whether it's like making enough money or just feeling like you're actually having an impact. It does matter.
Courtney just said something brilliant, and I love it. And she said, put up something anonymously for everyone to have an input. I'm a pilot in my spare time, and the number one thing the government did to improve air safety, and everybody's gonna be like, oh, all these things. The number one thing is, if you do something wrong as a pilot and you submit it in a form, there's a special form you can fill out, and you submit it, and they find out later that you did something wrong, you can't get in trouble. They can't come and prosecute you or give you a citation or whatever. And by doing that, they have all this great anonymous data of like, oh, okay, we actually are seeing what's happening, and it increased air safety like nothing else. So I love that idea of, hey, let people do it anonymously, because if you have a frontline SDR that's afraid to speak up for whatever reason, they're able to sort of put that in there, and you're able to sort of look at it with a neutral eye. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was like what Ronald, what you said in your LinkedIn post this morning about how it's, we're marketing and sales, we're supposed to be the same team, but sometimes it almost feels like we're two separate teams and it's constantly butting heads, right?
Yeah.
So and that'll be the conversation forever, is the alignment between marketing and sales. How do we make it work, right?
Mikey. So here's the thing. I'm an entrepreneur. It's what I've done my whole life, and so that's how I'm trained to think. And I don't. And when you kind of take this entrepreneurial mindset on, and you learn to kind of put ego aside, and you don't care about being right. You care about getting it right. And so I'm gonna say something that might feel a little bit like uncomfortable and a little bit controversial, but it's, understand, folks, that it's about getting results. That's the only thing I care about, right? I only care about getting results. I only care about getting the success that I want at the end of the day. So when I look at sales and marketing and the relationship between the two and that fracture, I'm going to talk to my marketing folks because marketing leaders in these organizations, you kind of need to take the lead in this relationship. And hear me out. Here's the reason why. Because sales, it's super easy to quantify their success, right? Oh, I sold something. It's money. Boom, right? Marketing, it's not so easy all the time, right? So that's why you get caught up in KPIs like the amount of leads sent or amount of people that attended an event, but it doesn't necessarily directly correlate to revenue. So it's harder to justify, or not justify, but to qualify your success. But we'll all agree that at the end of the day, more sales that's good. That's great for everyone, right? Money's good for everyone. So marketing leaders, I'm going to ask you guys to take the lead in building these relationships with your sales counterparts. If you build the relationships with your sales counterparts, you start having these conversations around what success is to them. You start having these conversations like Neil just mentioned, where we're getting actionable feedback. We're finding out how these leads we're creating are actually being received in the field, and you guys go at it as a team. You're going to have better success. And I'm talking to my marketing folks because, again, this I'm just calling it as it is. Like the salespeople, they feel like they don't need you half the time, right? And the sales leaders feel that way too. We know differently, but it's going to take your leadership in building that relationship with them so that you guys can go to market for your mutual success. And again, the more sales, once you build an advocate out of that sales leader, that sales team, marketers, it's going to make your job not only easier because they won't be fighting you, but you'll actually get good, actionable direction and information from them to make your marketing efforts more effective.
Cool. I love that take. That's some great insight there, Ronald. Okay. So we've been talking about, experiences and how to kind of change and what we should do to do that. I want to kind of move more to like the logistical piece of it and kind of your current processes and, what you've experienced there. So, when leads come into marketing, there's multiple different categories, right, in companies of where they should go, who should tackle them, and so on. How have you been able to make sure that it's routed to, say, an enterprise lead comes in to the right rep, or an SMB comes in to that rep? How have you been able to do that at your companies that you've worked at or your current company? Courtney, I'll start with you.
I mean, that's a really easy answer for OpenPrize because that is one of the things that our platform does. We make it really easy to change all of the criteria around where a lead should go and route it appropriately. That being said, I have never had this in the past, and those usually were a bit of a disaster and a lot of things fell through the cracks. So typically, once you get to a certain level, you do need a system that helps you route those appropriately, especially if you have a lot of reps. That's kind of like where we stand. If that's not how your system currently works, you're going to have to really have all eyes on these things all the time because it gets a lot harder. Putting those like parameters in place, if you want to automate it, gets really hard. But letting people kind of just take what comes in doesn't typically work so well. And because that's going to be a pretty inexact process, the thing that you need to make sure you're doing after that is you get these great leads in. Maybe they're terrible. You're not really sure. You need to make sure that you're tracking every step of that afterwards, from when that goes from a lead into maybe it's a contact or an opportunity or what's happening there. So if you do not have lead routing automated, make sure that those next steps are automated, or you're never really going to know what's working and what's falling through the cracks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point because the company I was at before, we did it manually, right? So it's like, okay, let's search up the company, X amount of employees, yada yada yada. Then who do we route it to? And there's so many times where somebody would come down to me like, "That's supposed to be my lead. What are you doing?" And I just be like, sorry, I thought I did the right thing. So I totally get that there. Neil, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, like I think this is what's been exciting about technology in the past 5 years around tools. Like there's always a lot of tools out there. This is probably the number 2 tool, right? Like you're going to go buy a CRM first, even when you're a seed company or pre-seed. I think literally the second you get your second AE, it's time now for a routing tool. And I think that, doing yourself harm, it's just going to slow everything else down and create a lot of chaos. So I would encourage people to get a tool like this earlier. Whenever you have the manual searching, like you mentioned, Mikey, like that just blows up so quickly.
Mhm.
So I think that this is probably the number 2 tool that you can go get right after a CRM.
Yeah, I think it's a great point too, because I think there's a lot of companies out there that just don't really. It's like, no, we can keep doing this for another few more hires, right? And then we'll it's working right now, and then let's do it. But and they don't really know when the best time is. So I love that advice there.
Also, when you do that, you start to build in bad habits that
Yeah.
it's not just a few more hires. Those bad habits are going to be so much harder to break as you grow. And I know it's hard to think about that when you're in a startup and like, you're just trying to survive. Really, you're probably working insane hours. But it does matter, because the longer you go without doing things properly, the harder it is to backtrack and actually get them done correctly.
Mhm. Yeah, and I kind of think it kind of loops back to Ronell's point too about how, at those early stage companies, you could be a marketer as well as a seller and so on. So it's like kind of understanding when is the best to kind of silo the two and also have something to connect both, right? Ronald, do you have any additional thoughts or?
I think my fellow panelists are certainly more qualified to talk about that lead distribution, and did a great job on that. The only thing that I would add is that we're mentioning tools and these fantastic tools that we have at our disposal. But I just want to remind everyone that tools are just that. They're tools. If you don't manage them, if you don't bring accountability to these tools, you're not going to be successful in using them. So using the proper tool, they're out there. I'm sure Neil and Courtney can tell you guys exactly like what softwares you should be using for this stuff, but you got to make sure that there's that accountability. And I'm speaking to my sales leaders. Your marketing team is only as good as the information that you can give to them. The best information they're going to get is the information that you give to them. So you got to make sure that your sellers are working those marketing qualified leads like quickly and not letting them get cold, working them quickly and giving that feedback back to your marketing team so they can help you to be more successful.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've seen when a lead routing tool comes in, and I have friends that work for several of the different companies out there, and I've been on the receiving end of them. It's kind of interesting because it's a question of also who owns that lead routing, right? Because back to now Ronell around like it's a tool. So sometimes marketing ops will have that conversation because it's going to help them. So maybe they'll start the conversation. Sometimes sales ops is interested as well because that might help them. So now we have two functional groups that are even agreeing that we need to go get a tool. But then as we go to implement it, like now who's holding each other accountable? Who's sort of coding or sort of creating those routing rules, and then who's ensuring that they're getting passed on, and then what are the timing and the SLAs. So there is a change transformation, which is a scary word for a lot of people, especially in startups. But it's good to have it happen, and so yeah, I think the number one thing this can do is act as a forcing function around getting both sales and marketing at the table to sort of review those, because it's one of those everybody owns it, so nobody owns it. So we
Mhm.
think the other person's doing it, and if it falls, we think it's malice on marketing operations, but they just were busy fighting another fire and we just didn't know. So it wasn't malice, or tools do go down or something broke, and the lead drop between the cracks. So it is important to just come together. Even now that we have a tool, it's even more important to come together to understand what's going on.
To that point, I think also this reminds me of something that I hear so often, and it's probably like maybe my biggest pet peeve. It's like, oh, this report broke. And I'm like, I mean, the report is pulling up nothing. But it's doing a great job of that. Like, it's actually that you stopped inputting the information the way that you were before. It's not going to read your mind when you started using a different field instead of something else. It's not just going to magically know that that's what happened there. So that report is like doing an amazing job pulling absolutely nothing. And we see that, we all see that a lot. If you are going to talk about data, like, or, these analytics, or you guys are measuring things, make sure you're measuring the same thing, and make sure you know where that data comes from, because that matters more than anything else. You can talk about all of the points you want, but if you have no idea what that is, what does it matter? Like, you don't know what you're measuring. So everyone needs to be on the same page there. And I think we should hold sales and marketing teams in general a little bit more accountable for knowing what data they're kind of spouting out a lot of the time.
I once saw a company that was a Series B company that, I kid you not, had 45 different fields in Salesforce calculating what we all call ACV, or annual revenue. I'm like, what even happened?
Yeah, and then it's impossible to figure anything out because like half the people are using one thing, one person's using this one, but he uses it the most, and no one knows what to do. And then you've got nothing. You basically have nothing. You did a lot of work to get no insight whatsoever.
Yeah, love that. I want to actually go back to kind of what Ronell said at the start about getting to leads quickly, and then as well as what Neil said around timing. How crucial is timing from, leads being passed from marketing to sales and actually following up on them? Is it because like for some, I've heard many different things, right? For different accounts to not go directly at them right away because they're kind of, trying to process. But I would love to hear your thoughts, Ronell. I feel like you have.
Wow, that's super easy for me, and I'll be this. This will be the least, the shortest answer that I've given. Very important. Listen, you're talking to a guy that has run multiple contact centers, right? So I know lead generation. I know sense of urgency. Listen, it is a ticking clock. It's a what's a better way to put it? A ticking clock. That's the best way to put it. All right. The minute that once that lead is generated, it is like an immediately starting to cool off. Right. So you got to get at it first. As quickly as possible. And you got to get the feedback over as quickly as possible. It just gets harder and harder as each hour and day goes by to get a hold of these folks, whether it is, I don't care how you're doing outreach, direct message, text, carrier pigeon, as Sales Hacker likes to use. I like that. Or that's a reference.
That was a good one. That one this morning.
You guys didn't see that. That's hilarious. But yeah, no, time is of the essence. But one thing, the things I've learned over the years is that at the sales leader does not have a system for holding their sellers accountable immediately. Like they're not going to value those leads. They're not. And if they have one bad one, like that means like all of them are bad, saying, so they start to put them on the back burner in terms of importance over the things that they self-generate.
Got it. Neil, Courtney, any thoughts on that, or is Ronell kind of banging on the head?
Well, for a contact us form, of course, right? Like, because if they're doing a contact us form, they've probably self-selected themselves to be a small, medium business. And of course, and what I think is also funny is you have to actually benchmark it. And this is where I've seen things go wrong, is because people don't benchmark. They're like, oh yeah, we have a system in Salesforce where we run a report and our SDRs call them or email them within 2 minutes. And I'm like, perfect. And we go input a lead and we benchmark it. Well, guess what? It took 30 minutes from the landing page to whatever marketing automation to a lead routing to CRM. So yeah, they called them within 2 minutes, but it's been so much longer that the person perceived reality. So you have to benchmark that process, and you have to keep benchmarking it. And guess what? You have lots of different forms, and marketing operations runs lots of different programs. So you have to benchmark all of them on a monthly, quarterly basis to make sure that you're consistently delivering the value. And then I will say on an MQL, sometimes sales can get aggressive on something that's like a downloaded white paper or a really high top of funnel. So I think understanding where that measurement is on more of the gray areas, that's where the complexity comes in. But of course, if someone's doing a contact us form, you should call them immediately. But like start to think on when we have really high funnel stuff of either webinars or downloaded content, how fast we should go contact them. I probably don't need to call at 4:45 on a Friday when I'm just accidentally behind some piece of gated content that I didn't know was going to trigger a sales rep.
Yeah.
So I completely agree with that too. Like it's marketing teams, just not everything's a lead. Like you don't need like alerts. If you give people too many alerts, I'm really guilty of this. Like the more things I have that pop up at me, I just don't look at any of them. So I always think about that when I'm building things out for people, because like if I'm the end user and I ignore a lot of stuff sometimes, like my brain just shuts it out. Like I have to assume it happens to other people too.
One thing to add really quick, just as kind of a best practice, as we're talking about this, one of the reasons that this relationship goes off the rails with sales and marketing is that, sales ends up chasing leads, right? So you send over a lead, you send over an opportunity, and they're just spending all this time trying to get that person to set an appointment with, right? So build that into your process, whether it is phone prospecting or lead generation or some of these other mediums that we're talking about, LinkedIn or your website stuff or whatever. Build appointment setting in it, right? So when your seller is getting that qualified lead, there's an appointment component already in that, right? So that we've got that buy-in from the customer, because half the time sellers just waste a ton of time just trying to follow up so they can set an appointment. So that'll help a lot of you guys out there that are kind of in that, that startup mode, to put a system in place that's scalable and, keeps that relationship good between those two groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love that. Cool. And then also to kind of go on to that, and Courtney, I would love your thoughts here. Not all leads that come into sales teams could be classified as equal. So how do you know when to, pace the process, but also kind of hit the ground running and speed it up?
Some are pretty obvious. Like one's like you want a demo and you're at a company that is within your ICP, like route that directly to an AE, especially if it's someone you might know through like technographic data, like already utilizes like a competitor or something like that. Don't waste their time. Like move them forward. I know when I'm buying something, like when someone wants me to jump through like 50 hoops, when I know what I'm doing, I'm just like, oh God, this makes me not want to do this. So be aware of who your sellers are is going to be one part of that, but it's going to be trial and error. And sometimes you're going to think that this event was amazing. We need to follow up insanely fast with these people. And sometimes you're going to be right. And sometimes you're going to realize, you know what, we probably should have nurtured them a little bit. Start dividing that up by titles, departments, and time of year when these things are happening, and take a look and see what works and what matters and what doesn't, and route accordingly. You're going to make mistakes. It's okay. But the last thing you want is to send worry that you're going to miss something and send everything over like it's on fire when it's just not. And in most cases, people could stick with a nurture campaign for a while. Like think about that human contact. It's important, but at what point is it necessary? Because if there are like 20 automated emails that can go out over a year before this person is likely ever to take a meeting, keep that with marketing before you move it over to sales. Like start to measure when those calls actually matter, because that's a human doing that and they could be spending their time on better things. You always have to be looking at that, like the value of what you're not doing when you're chasing things that were never going to happen. And like kind of to Ronald's point earlier, like not just like your sales work things to death. You also have to know when to quit and maybe send that back to marketing to nurture for a while, because you're a startup, someone's heard of you, you don't want to let go of them. But you might need to just like relax and send them something once in a while until it's probably time to, really re-engage again. But you can't engage full speed forever and they're just going to block you or stop allowing you to send anything.
Yeah. And, I love what you said there, where it's like, okay, leads red hot, send them straight to an AE, right? Because I remember at a previous role, everything had to go through an SDR before they went on to an AE. And it's just like, I get on the call, I'm like, that's another step. They're trying to buy, they want to go. And now you're just kind of wasting the time when you can just give it directly to someone who's much more experienced, much more knowledgeable, and kind of talk the move it quicker, right? So I love that point. Neil, do you have something to add?
Yeah, the sort of peanut buttering of rules absolutely crushes me. If you're selling to somebody and they're in your ICP, and you route it and it gets routed to an SDR, why would you ever do that? Like a CEO can still buy tools at a Series B company, and they're entering their information, and you're going to put them to an SDR to qualify them? No, man, they can purchase right away. Like, let's just slide that right through. And Courtney mentioned ICP. I just want to put some definitional things out there. go Google it and inform yourself. But I get really passionate, right? Like firmographic, demographic, and technographic information, which you mentioned. If your tool's pulling that, that is amazing. And then starting to rank them during the process. And then you have a persona of whoever your buyer is and the buying committee. And if it's anybody in those, let's get them through. And the most important part about the ICP is that we're ranking those, and we're ranking them for a segment. So if we're in mid-market, we've now ranked all of our companies. And this is actually where we can bring sales and marketing together, is we've got our certain algorithmic rules, but then sales being like, no. Like, we know X companies on my list and I really want to sell to them, and being able to tier out those. So we have no more than 10 A companies, no more than 30 or 40, depending on how big your patch is, B companies, and having those ranked out, because that's sort of going to dictate how much follow-up we're going to do and how fast we can get it to the rep. And if marketing has visibility into that too, they're starting to understand what's in the rep's mind and what's sort of important for them as well.
Yeah, great. That's fantastic. Okay, guys. Well, we only have 5 minutes left. I do have a question that I want to address from the audience before I let you all go. But I know we've been talking a lot about just marketing and sales and alignment there and so on. Do you have any advice on, or do you know, are there any other teams that you think outside of marketing and sales can help this whole process move quicker, more effectively, more seamlessly? What are your thoughts, Neil?
Well, it depends on what we call marketing, but field managers are incredibly important. Campaign ops sometimes aren't even brought into this. Those two are important. And then what's actually crucial is we didn't even talk about customer success at all today. Like, they're the ones also that sort of end up having a really good relationship with the buyer of, and they'll get little tidbits of what happened during the sales process, of what was good and wasn't. Now that they've sort of bought and the pressure's off, they'll be like, boy, that sales rep, little aggressive. And so bringing in customer success to sort of hear what the customer was thinking about afterwards, I think is really important.
Yeah, cool. Ronald, Courtney, do you have anything to add to that?
Ronald, go ahead.
I don't really have anything to add to that. I think both Neil and Courtney are, that enterprise world is where they play a lot. My one piece of advice is that all of this stuff is going to be, a lot of it just comes down to communication, and the communication style of any organization starts from the top. So your senior level executives, your founders, your owners, those are the folks who need to take the lead in determining how you're going to communicate internally between those groups.
I think tying all of this back to revenue, which you kind of do, and I'll tell you guys, like, when I get asked, I have a little column next to it that I'm usually on like a sheet as people are asking me for things, and it's just like money, like, how is this going to drive revenue in any way, which gets rid of a lot of dumb questions or asks sometimes, which I'm a fan of. But customer success matters so much. When you guys are going in for your next round of funding, recurring revenue really matters. And if maybe you can sell a lot, but you can't keep people, that's very important. So not factoring in, like, you might do really well selling to these groups and that's what everyone's tracking, but then you can't keep them because of X, Y, or Z. That really matters. So I think everyone kind of likes to kind of ignore customer success. And I feel bad even saying that, but it's definitely true. They take a backseat to sales in most cases. They know who's happy, and you need more happy customers. You don't just need more customers in most cases, unless your model is insane and that just works for you, which, well done at that point. So I've got nothing to tell you, but yeah, in most cases you need happy customers.
Yeah, I love that. And I think maybe the next one we do has got to be from the SQL to close to success and retention. And then we can kind of talk about that whole process, right? But you know what? I'll give we're almost at the top of the hour here. I got one question for Ronald before I let you guys go. What's the game in the background?
So any red-blooded American over the age of 30-ish knows what that is. You're Canadian. That's why you know.
That's not true, Ronald. I don't know what that means.
Courtney.
Yeah, you've got nothing there. What is that?
This is NBA Jam.
Oh, I couldn't see. I see. Oh, I now see the NBA on the side there. Went right over me. Awesome, guys. Well, you know what? Thank you three so much for taking the time out of your day. Honestly, I learned a ton. You know, I'm not very knowledgeable in this whole space, so thank you so much for blessing me with your knowledge, your expertise, your insights. I'm sure the audience learned a ton as well. If there's any questions that we didn't get to, everybody that's here, go follow Courtney, Neil, and Ronell on the on LinkedIn. I'm sure they'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. They're doing some amazing stuff. And again, Open Prize, thank you so much for sponsoring this webinar. If you guys don't know what they're doing, go check them out. They are fantastic. They're doing some great stuff. So again, all three of you, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And I really look forward to doing it again soon.